It was supposed to be a normal day. Just another dry academic lecture in Xenohistory 304, Mythological Species and Galactic Urban Legends. Professor Zix stood at the front of the massive lecture hall, 6 limbs folded behind his back, adjusting his 4th eye stalk with a scholarly flair. "And that, my dear students," he intoned, "brings us to today's topic, the so-called mythological species known as humans." The room dimmed slightly as the projection behind him flared to life, displaying a dramatic rendering of a human bipedal, oddly smooth-skinned, and definitely unreal. Laughter trickled through the crowd. The idea of humans, those fictional chaos gremlins of galactic rumor, was a guaranteed crowd-pleaser. Professor Zix launched into his presentation with gusto, clearly an exaggerated fabrication by ancient traders suffering from space madness. After all, a species capable of igniting chemical reactions inside tubes to propel themselves into orbit? Ridiculous. A biochemistry so flawed it relies on stress hormones and bitter bean lauder for survival? Utter nonsense. Excuse me. The interruption came from the back of the hall. All 7 of Zix's eye stalks swiveled in perfect sync. His chromatophores rippled into a confused beige. There, sprawled across one of the 2 oddly small seats meant for species with limited appendage counts, sat a figure. 2 arms, 2 legs, an alarming number of exposed teeth. "Yes?" Zix asked cautiously, consulting the roster. "Kalai?" "Yup," Kalai said with a lazy wave. "Transfer student. Quick question, exactly how mythological are we talking here? 'Cause I'm feeling pretty real, though, I mean, I could pinch myself to be sure." There was a stunned silence. Somewhere in the crowd, a gelatinous student fainted. "And me too," another voice chimed in brightly, a second human raising their hand halfway down the hall. "Hi, I'm Jordan. Question for you, Professor. How does a mythological species like us manage to rack up 20,000 credits in tuition debt?" Professor Zix made a noise that sounded like a coffee grinder choking on gravel. His mind reeled. 15 years of research. 3 books. An award-winning dissertation titled Humans, the Galaxy's Most Persistent Delusion. All of it disintegrating. Live in front of the entire class. "I must consult my notes," he stammered, trembling slightly. "Oh no, please, keep going," Kalai grinned, pulling a bright red pepper from their bag. "I'm dying to hear your theories about how we couldn't possibly exist. I read your latest paper, by the way. Page 47 says humans consuming capsaicin is biochemically impossible. Guess I'm just a hallucination with a high spice tolerance." They bit into the pepper with visible satisfaction. Several students shrieked. A crystalline observer short-circuited from sensory overload. "Would you like some?" Kalai offered a nearby student, who fainted with a gentle squelch. Jordan raised their hand again. "Also, you mentioned in Chapter 3 that humans could not possibly be persistence hunters due to insufficient thermal regulation. I just jogged here from the other side of campus, feeling great. Could go another 20 kilometers. Mythologically speaking, of course." Professor Zix stared at them as if they were a gravity anomaly. "Class is dismissed," he muttered. "Indefinitely, possibly forever." "Oh, but we haven't even gotten to the tool use section," Kalai said cheerfully. "Your thesis says our appendages are too clumsy for fine manipulation. I brought my grandma's hand-knitted sweater and some differential equations. She solved both at the same time." Zix was already fleeing, leaving behind a faint trail of chromatophore panicking. Jordan and Kalai exchanged a look. "You think we broke him?" "Pretty sure. I mean, I did bring coffee." Jordan pulled out a thermos and took a loud sip. "Also mythical. Want to share it with the class?" "Sure," Kalai shrugged. "I've got cookies too, chocolate chip, another fabricated earth snack apparently." The remaining students, bewildered, fascinated, and just a little terrified, began edging forward. And just like that, the myth of humanity ended. replaced by the much more terrifying truth. They were real. They were here. And they brought snacks. Professor Zix did not sleep that night. He did not meditate. He did not cycle through his usual three-phase chromatophore calming patterns. He sat in his office, twitching, surrounded by scattered datapads, open reference scrolls, and a single uneaten protein cube slowly drying out under the glow of his desk lamp. The problem wasn't just that the humans were real. The problem was everything they did. Zix had built his career on the impossibility of humans. Their existence was a joke, a teaching aid, the academic equivalent of a ghost story. And now 2 of them were not only attending his class, but calmly obliterating every piece of scholarly consensus with pepper snacks, hot bean water, and cheerful sarcasm. It was traumatizing. Meanwhile, back in the cafe-turned-chaos hub, Kalai and Jordan had set up what could generously be called office hours, or, more accurately, snack-fueled myth-busting with PowerPoint slides and dangerously high charisma. And this, Jordan said, tapping a hollow screen as students crowded around, is called coffee. It's a psychoactive beverage we invented to simulate wakefulness and encourage poor life decisions. Want a sample? A brave, crystalline student reached out and took a sip. It paused, shuddered, and then, in perfect deadpan, "I can taste colors." "Welcome to higher education," Kalai grinned. The crowd was growing. A few faculty members hovered at the edges, watching with concern. The university's food safety department had already issued 2 alerts, both of which were promptly ignored. The xenonutrition professor was crying softly into their nutrient paste. "I don't understand," a tentacled student muttered, staring at Kalai. "You consumed capsaicin? For fun?" "Absolutely," Kalai said, holding up another Carolina Reaper. "Pain is just the universe's way of telling you you're alive. Plus, it clears the sinuses." A nearby VXI fainted, again. Jordan pulled out a tray. "Cookies, anyone? Homemade." Mythologically impossible, of course. According to your textbooks, human baking is an elaborate cultural fiction. The cookies vanished, faster than Professor Zix's credibility. Just as things were reaching peak sugar high, Zix himself entered. Or, to be precise, burst in, looking like he hadn't blinked in 6 hours and had just lost an argument with his own brain. "You," he pointed at the humans, "you've turned my lecture into a carnival. This is not pedagogy, this is anarchy." "Academic anarchy," Jordan said helpfully, offering him a seat and a scone. "Aye. What is this?" Zix asked, sniffing the baked good suspiciously. "Cinnamon," Kalai replied, "and validation." Zix made a noise somewhere between a wheeze and a spiritual crisis. "I have 15 years of peer-reviewed data disproving your entire existence," he muttered. Kalai leaned in. "Well, I guess that makes us extra credit." There was a pause. Then Zix sat down. He took the cookie. He bit into it. His eyes widened in horror. "This is delicious." "Yup," Jordan said, "made with a little love and a lot of molecular gastronomy." Zix blinked, shook his head, and quietly muttered, "I need to call my publisher, and possibly a priest." One brave student raised a tentacle. "Professor, does this mean the mythological species course is cancelled?" Zix looked around the room. At Kalai, who was now demonstrating how duct tape could hold together a spacesuit in a vacuum. At Jordan, who was passing out thermoses labeled liquid sanity. Handle with caution. At the aliens now casually debating which part of the human digestive system was most terrifying and how to acquire more cookies. Zix sighed. "No," he said finally. "Class is not cancelled, it's evolving." The students erupted into applause. Jordan raised a thermos. "To chaos." Kalai clinked her pepper against it. "And coffee?" Zix groaned, but couldn't help smiling. "Just a little. as his lecture notes began reformatting themselves into the title of a brand new course. Humans 101, an academic emergency. The day after Professor Zick's impromptu collapse into acceptance, the university's administrative inbox exploded. It wasn't because of a scandal, a fire, or a breach in the gravity protocols. It was because students wanted to switch majors. En masse, in species-wide droves, to a department that didn't exist. Human studies? Dean Vexter repeated aloud, his 5 consciousness cores vibrating with confusion. We don't offer a degree in human studies. We don't even have a syllabus. His assistant glanced nervously at the growing pile of physical transfer forms, delivered by enthusiastic students who had handcrafted their petitions using earth materials like paper and glitter glue. One was scented, another sang when opened. Yes, sir, the assistant said, cautiously nudging a form that was shaped like a cookie. But it seems the students have already started attending classes, unofficial ones, hosted in the campus cafe. Dean Vexter pulsed pale blue with concern. They're learning from the humans directly? The assistant nodded. It's become quite the phenomenon. There's coffee, live demonstrations, a lecture about something called memes? The dean's 3rd consciousness core short-circuited on the spot. Meanwhile, in the aforementioned cafe, chaos reigned. Kalai stood on a table, holding a duct-taped laptop aloft. Today's topic: how humans survive deep space by refusing to accept limitations and repurposing their trash into functioning life support systems. Exhibit A, Apollo 13. Exhibit B, my laptop. Exhibit C, the crowd cheered. Alien students were perched on ceilings, hovering on anti-grav platforms, wrapped around support pillars. One was broadcasting the lecture live to 6 other campuses. At the back of the cafe, Professor Zick sat quietly, sipping something dark and steaming. He had acquired a scarf. No one knew where it came from. This is educational blasphemy, muttered an elderly xenopedagogue beside him, watching Kalai pour coffee through what appeared to be a sock filter. There's no structure, no peer review, no controlled environment. Zix took a long, pained sip. That's the beauty of it, he whispered. Jordan stepped forward, holding up a large, colorful sign that read, "Why not?" People keep asking, they said, why humans do the things we do, why we jump off cliffs with flexible cords tied to our feet, why we ride giant steel boxes through the sky, why we taught birds to mimic our speech and then gave them profanity. They flipped the sign around. On the back it read, "Because it's awesome." The real question, Jordan said with a grin, is why not? The crowd roared in agreement. Even the grumpy xenopedagogue accidentally clapped before catching himself. Word of the impromptu lectures spread fast. Within days, alien students from other universities began arriving. One delegation from the Quarn Nebula brought a giant inflatable question mark and joined Kalai's office hours to ask about rubber ducks. A crystalline scholar interviewed Jordan on the cultural significance of pizza. A small contingent from the Glorathian Diplomatic Academy arrived just to observe this so-called emotional adaptability in action. They left with matching t-shirts that read, "I came for the theories," and left with existential dread and a muffin. The university board held an emergency session. "We can't ignore this," one administrator said. "They've already designed a logo." "Students are publishing papers," said another, holding up a glowing data pad titled "The Cognitive Chaos Engine, a Study in Human Innovation." "We have no choice," Dean Vextor finally announced, his tentacles twitching. "We must establish an official department." "Human studies," whispered a junior admin, trembling. "No," the dean said grimly. "Human adaptation and multi-species cultural integration through improvised chaos and applied snack distribution." There was a long silence. "Can we abbreviate that?" someone asked. "We'll call it HAMCITISDD," the dean replied. How about just human studies? The assistant suggested. Fine, the dean sighed, but only because it fits better on merchandise. Back in the cafe, Jordan was helping an amorphous blob write a thesis on brownie diplomacy. Kalai was giving a hands-on workshop titled How to Explain Quantum Mechanics with Popcorn. And Professor Zix, now wearing a shirt that read, I disproved humans and all I got was enlightenment, was updating his course catalog. The new title read, Introduction to Humans, Curiosity, Chaos, and Coffee. The galaxy would never be the same. The cafe was no longer just a cafe. It had become something else. Part study hall, part symposium, part interstellar curiosity carnival. Somewhere between the espresso machine and the holographic chalkboard, something fundamental had shifted in the university's academic soul. Students called it the caffeine nexus. Faculty called it the collapse of the known curriculum. Professor Zix, now a self-proclaimed field researcher in the newly sanctioned Human Studies department, called it Tuesday. Jordan, as always, called it a good time. They stood behind a makeshift coffee bar made out of repurposed food trays and duct tape. Their name tag, hand-scribbled on a neon sticker, read, Jordan, mythical being and barista of enlightenment. All right, today's special, they said cheerfully, pouring steaming liquid into tiny cups, is a double shot of espresso, followed by a rapid-fire discussion on why humans think trying dangerous things is a valid scientific method. Kalai lounged nearby, typing something into a battered tablet while balancing a holographic muffin on her head. Bonus points, she added, if anyone can explain why we put wheels on luggage after inventing the airplane. A tentacled engineering student raised a cup. To increase the challenge of travel? Nope, Jordan grinned. Just bad planning and stubborn refusal to update designs. Next question. The laughter that followed wasn't just amused. It was delighted. These aliens weren't here just for novelty anymore. They were here to learn. The scent of espresso and sugar filled the air. So did the low hum of debate. A crystalline student was mid-argument about whether duct tape should be reclassified as a Tier 2 scientific tool. A gelatinous one was attempting to solve a Rubik's Cube using pseudopods. A floating cloud being was humming along to lo-fi beats being piped through the walls. Nobody was sure where the speaker system came from, or if it had always been sentient. Kalai stood up suddenly and clapped her hands. Attention, pop quiz time. Groans. Cheers. Nervous vibrations. Question 1. What do humans do when faced with an unsolvable problem? A dozen limbs shot into the air. Make it someone else's problem, offered one brave student. Create a new problem that makes the first one look easy, added another. Build a questionable machine out of trash and snacks? Kalai gave them finger guns. Correct, all of the above, and bonus points for snack-based innovation. Professor Zix, watching from the corner while sipping a triple-shot latte, scribbled notes furiously. His latest research paper was already titled, Behavioral Patterns of Homo Chaoticus, an Espresso-Fueled Inquiry. A young assistant floated over to him, nervously adjusting their academic robes. Professor? The dean wants to know if this qualifies as an accredited class? Zix blinked all 7 of his eyes. Does it contain learning? He asked. Yes. Does it involve critical thinking, cultural exchange, and mild existential panic? Then tell the dean it's the most education anyone's gotten since the fire suppression bot tried to debate philosophy. Across the room, Jordan had just finished a demonstration on Earth breakfast rituals using a waffle iron, 3 types of syrup, and what was either whipped cream or a failed chemistry experiment. Now, they said, slapping a stack of napkin handouts on the table, let's talk about time management. Or, as we call it on Earth, oh no, is that due today? Kalai leaned back, sipping her coffee. We may not be the most efficient species, but we are very motivated by panic. The aliens scribbled notes like their lives depended on it. And maybe, in some way, they did. Because for the first time, they weren't learning abstract facts. They were learning how to think like a human. And it was terrifyingly effective. That afternoon, the university issued a formal statement. The Human Studies Department is now officially recognized as an experimental interdisciplinary initiative, pending further containment. That evening, the sign on the cafe was changed. In glowing neon letters, it now read, "Office hours. Bring your brain and a mug." And below that, in slightly smaller print, "Espresso Enlightenment, served daily." Professor Zix had once been a respected authority in xenopedagogical circles. He'd published papers, won awards, lectured at prestigious galactic symposiums. He had written the definitive thesis on Human Mythology, a case study in collective galactic delusion. And now he was wearing a scarf, sitting cross-legged on the floor of his office, surrounded by holograms of duct tape schematics, coffee brewing charts, and brownies. He'd eaten 6 for research. Somewhere along the spiral of caffeine, sugar, and academic despair, Zix had reached a terrifying conclusion. The humans were right. And worse, they weren't trying to be. They weren't defying logic out of rebellion. They simply refused to accept that the universe was a fixed system, which, from an academic standpoint, was catastrophic. But from a scientific perspective, it was the most exciting thing Zix had ever seen. He was scribbling notes with wild abandon when his assistant arrived, ducking around the suspended espresso IV drip and the hand-labeled jars of chaos fuel on the shelf. "Professor, are you all right?" Zix looked up, pupils dilated, fur rippling with erratic chromatic bursts. "I've made a breakthrough," he whispered. The assistant backed up 2 cautious steps. "You mean about the human lectures?" "No," Zix said, rising slowly and dramatically. "About everything." He tapped a console. A hologram flickered to life, displaying a crude drawing of a cat wearing a jetpack made of recycled kitchen appliances. The assistant blinked. "You don't," Zix cackled. "But that's the beauty of it. Humans don't wait for perfect solutions. They create approximate madness that works just well enough to succeed." He pointed to a new file labeled, "The Hold My Beer Principle, Human Innovation as Improvised Performance Art." They function on audacity, improvisation, and a troubling love of glitter, Zix said, eyes glowing. They are chaos given form, spite given direction, curiosity duct taped to caffeine. The assistant glanced at the screen. "Is that the moon landing?" "Yes," Zix said gleefully. "They sent themselves into space before inventing decent crash cushions. They calculated orbital trajectories by hand." He dragged a stylus through the air, sketching more diagrams. "And when something breaks, they fix it with tape and sarcasm. They are powered by narrative defiance. They do things not because they're easy, but because someone said they couldn't." The assistant tried to interject, but Zix was already pacing. "I've started rewriting my next textbook," he muttered. "It's now called Humans, a Study in Existence as Performance Art, Chapter 1, in which they weaponize spaghetti." The assistant's head tilted. "I'm sorry, what?" "Spaghetti," Zix confirmed. "Apparently they developed a theory of fluid dynamics based on pasta in motion. I haven't verified it yet, but at this point, would you doubt it?" "No." "Good," Zix nodded. "Because we're going to the cafe. I have questions, they have snacks, and somewhere between those two, I shall find academic enlightenment." By the time Zix arrived, Kalai was showing a group of aliens how to make origami X-Wings, while Jordan narrated the history of humanity's most absurd inventions, beginning with lawn flamingos and ending with microwave burritos. "Humans invented a food so chaotic," Jordan explained, "that it spins while cooking and yet still somehow manages to be cold in the middle." "That's impossible," a student gasped. "Exactly," Jordan said with a wink. "And that's the problem. You're still thinking inside the box. We threw the box away. Then we turned it into a fort. Zix stepped forward, eyes wide. Jordan. Professor, they said, grinning. Welcome back. You want coffee? I want purpose, he replied, and maybe a brownie. Jordan poured him a cup. Same thing, really. Zix took a sip, nodded slowly, then turned to the class. Lesson 1, he said. Everything you thought was impossible is just a suggestion humans haven't argued with yet. There was a pause, then wild applause. Back at the administrative offices, the dean received a notification. Professor Zix has just submitted a new course proposal. Title, Improvised Engineering and Cultural Mayhem, a Practical Guide. Subtitle, We didn't know it was impossible, so we did it anyway. It started with a sign. Not a warning, not a prophecy, just a banner. Hand-painted, uneven, and somehow glowing, despite lacking any visible power source. It read, Galactic Science Fair, presented by Human Studies. Judging criteria, wow factor, improbability, and snack bribes. Dean Vextor stared at it from the safety of a balcony several floors above. You said this would be a controlled demonstration, he muttered. The assistant beside him nodded solemnly. They said that, yes, and then Jordan asked if fire cannons were considered too much. The dean activated his anxiety regulator. Below, the university plaza had been completely transformed. Alien students bustled between booths made of translucent metal, sticky notes, and pure ambition. Holographic displays flickered, chemical vapors glowed. A floating cloud being was trying to explain thermodynamics using balloon animals. And at the heart of it all stood Kalai, arms folded, grin wide, standing beside a massive hand-labeled contraption made of pipes, wires, and at least 3 toasters. I give you, she announced to a group of wide-eyed judges, the Interstellar Potato Propulsion System, Mark IV. Well, potatoes? Asked a crystalline judge nervously. Because they're readily available, Jordan replied, slapping a red button, and because someone said we shouldn't. The cannon went off with a dramatic "ha!" launching a glowing potato into low orbit. The crowd erupted in cheers. A faint woo-hoo echoed from a satellite above. Meanwhile, the art department had rebranded themselves as the Aesthetic Engineers, showcasing a gravity-defying sculpture made of coffee filters, planetary debris, and what looked suspiciously like an old vacuum cleaner. It was titled, Entropy is a Dance Move. I thought this was a science fair, someone muttered. It is, Zix replied, holding a latte and a clipboard. It's just human science. The physics department, inspired by Jordan's lectures, had entered a machine whose sole purpose was to knock over increasingly elaborate rows of dominoes. Its name, Chaos Chain, a tribute to Rube Goldberg. The judges, who were now being followed by a self-aware slideshow drone, paused at a booth labeled Time Management, the Panic Protocol. It was a visual simulation of students procrastinating until the last possible moment and then creating a working warp drive with duct tape and screaming. Is that, one judge whispered, how they actually function? Oh, yes, Jordan said proudly, and we've got empirical data, 3 broken printers and an exploded coffee machine to prove it. By mid-afternoon, the plaza was filled with laughter, strange noises, and the smell of something burning, but in a fun way. Dean Vextor finally descended from his balcony, flanked by administrators in ceremonial robes that smelled faintly of fear. He approached Professor Zix. What exactly, he said slowly, have you done? Zix, beaming, gestured to the chaos. I've facilitated. Dean Vextor sighed. You've incited academic rebellion with baking soda volcanoes. Correct, Zix nodded. Also with duct tape, glitter, and unrestrained optimism. The dean turned to Kalai and Jordan. now surrounded by adoring students and a snack booth labeled quantum cookies. They exist in all states of deliciousness. I suppose you're proud of this. Very, Kalai said. Unreasonably, added Jordan. Terrified, said one administrator quietly. That evening, the winners were announced. Best in Show went to an alien trio who had successfully built a translation AI powered entirely by sarcasm and passive-aggressive notes. It worked flawlessly on human dialects. Second place went to a biology project titled, What Happens If You Give a Slug Caffeine? The answer, apparently, was breakdancing. The closing speech was delivered by Professor Zix, now wearing a lab coat covered in student signatures. Today, he said, we have witnessed not the breakdown of academia, but its glorious mutation. The scientific method as understood by humans is part experiment, part accident, and part deeply emotional panic attack. And it works. Applause thundered. Literally, thanks to the weather simulation project in booth 27. As the stars twinkled overhead and the last of the glow-in-the-dark noodles were cleaned up, Jordan raised a mug of cocoa. To curiosity, they said. To chaos, Kalai added. And Zix, with a proud, exhausted smile, raised his cup to the future of science, whatever that means now. In a chamber floating somewhere between the outer arms of a spiral galaxy, the Galactic Academic Council convened beneath ancient lights and even older rules. The atmosphere shimmered with the weight of bureaucracy and faint panic. At the center of it all, High Scholar Vina hovered, her bioluminescent thoughts flickering rapidly as she addressed the room. The situation, she insisted, was no longer merely concerning, it was actively destabilizing. Around her, council members pulsed, vibrated, and shimmered with various species-specific signs of intellectual distress. They had gathered not because of war or planetary disaster, but for something far more chaotic, the spread of unregulated human ideas. A series of holographic recordings lit up the council chamber. On each panel was footage of what was now known across half the galaxy as the Science Fair incident. A potato cannon fired in glorious slow motion. Alien students danced in a parade of improvised lab coats. Sentient origami led a march under a banner that read, "Why not?" The council watched in increasingly horrified silence. This isn't merely cross-cultural exchange, muttered one counselor with twitching antennae. It's ideological contagion. Counselor Zalto, a logic field constructed from pure data and distaste, spoke at last. The human interference was not just disruptive, they intoned. It was evolving faster than they could monitor. The concept of espresso, they noted, had been turned into an educational tool. Duct tape had somehow become an officially sanctioned engineering material, and students were submitting thesis papers based on memes. Applications to the human-led university had spiked, reports said, not only from curious students, but from previously skeptical scholars now obsessed with understanding the anomaly. Even council interns were putting in transfer requests. The situation demanded intervention. A delegation, Ex Alto declared, would be dispatched to assess the damage and restore order. On campus, Kalai and Jordan were in the middle of a lecture titled Humans, because the universe needed drama, when the delegation arrived. A sleek council cruiser descended from orbit like a judgmental thundercloud. From its bay stepped a shimmering squad of dignitaries, robed in radiant fabric that repelled both dust and enthusiasm. They were met with lanyards, each read, "Welcome, council friends. Ask about our chaos theory." Scholar Prime Halzir, composed of crystalline light and withering glances, approached. He surveyed the scene with thinly veiled skepticism. He had expected primitive rituals or perhaps desperate improvisation. What he found was worse. Structure. Joyous, relentless, disorderly structure. The delegation was escorted through a campus tour that included the Zen Garden of Existential Crisis, a hallway entirely papered in philosophical sticky notes, and a live demonstration of a sarcasm-powered translator. Kalai explained that their curriculum was rooted in flexibility, irrational curiosity, and caffeine-fueled brilliance. Jordan added that humans didn't break rules, they treated them as art supplies. The delegation was silent through most of it. Some took notes. One cried. Another asked softly if duct tape came in different colors. The breaking point came at the quantum cookie booth. A judge hesitantly accepted a snack. The rest followed. Back aboard the cruiser, the delegation prepared their report. Though it remained classified, leaks emerged almost immediately. Phrases like chaotically effective, aggressively enthusiastic, and somewhat delicious appeared in the summary. Someone had also scribbled a note in the margins. Must get recipe. The council, despite its tradition of caution, quietly voted to remove restrictions on further observation. It was too late for containment. Now the question was understanding. The Human Studies Department was upgraded to permanent status. Jordan and Kalai were given unofficial titles by the faculty, ambassadors of mayhem. Students wore shirts that read, "Ask me about epistemological entropy," and I passed human studies, and all I got was this existential crisis. Later that evening, the observation deck atop the Human Studies Tower hummed with soft music and warm lights. Jordan leaned against the railing, sipping cocoa. Kalai joined them, holding a tray of brownies. They didn't speak for a while, just watching stars twinkle and distant satellites drift. "Think they'll come back?" Kalai asked, nudging her shoulder into Jordan's. "Oh," Jordan replied with a grin. "They'll come back. You can't unsee this much chaos." Kalai chuckled. "They always do." The vote passed in silence, but the moment echoed like a supernova across the academic galaxies. For the first time in the Galactic Consortium's long and painfully procedural history, a new department was authorized without a subcommittee, without a pilot phase, and without any hope of controlling it. The name was simple, strange, and utterly human: the Department of Impossible Studies. Professor Zix stood on the newly installed balcony of the department's tower, which was somehow both under construction and over-engineered at the same time. The building was shaped like a Mobius strip wrapped around a quantum espresso machine because Jordan insisted it encapsulated the vibe. Kalai was teaching a class on historical anomalies and portable snack technology. Jordan had just launched the semester's first lecture with a musical number, 3 practical demonstrations, and a potato cannon named Eleanor. Applications had flooded in from every corner of the galaxy, not just from curious students, but from faculty. Respected physicists were requesting sabbaticals to go understand memes. Alien historians wanted to take a closer look at duct tape timelines. At least one diplomatic envoy had requested a transfer after watching a single lecture titled Conflict Resolution via Interpretive Dance and Pie Charts. Inside the main auditorium, an amphitheater that rearranged itself based on audience mood, Zix opened the inaugural class with a cup of coffee in one hand and a stack of shredded academic journals in the other. "We are here," he said solemnly, "to study the unstudied, to pursue the forbidden, to explore that which has consistently refused to stay in any conventional framework." He paused for effect. "In other words, humans." The room didn't applaud. It cheered. And in the back, a banner unfurled on its own, probably due to rogue nanobots or Jordan's poor sense of restraint. It read, "Defying Reality Since Prehistory." The first official course was titled Audacity in Applied Practice. It was immediately followed by Experimental Improvisation in Zero Gravity. Several council delegates attended in secret. One fainted when they learned the course grading rubric involved a wow column. Kalai's lecture on quantum curiosity and snack-based diplomacy included a live cooking segment, a small detour into narrative physics, and a heated debate over whether cookies constituted a diplomatic strategy or a threat level. Jordan's honors seminar, Why Not? An Inquiry into Reckless Innovation, became an instant classic. Week 1 involved students designing time machines using only recycled parts, foam, and a strong desire to prove someone wrong. By week 2, half the class had built working prototypes. Most only traveled 10 seconds into the past, but one overshot and left a thank you note from 400 years in the future. Meanwhile, Earth had become the galaxy's premier academic destination. Travel agencies began offering chaos scholarships. Embassies hosted events with themes like logic versus vibes, a debate. Students returned to their homeworld quoting Jordan-like scripture and wearing shirts that said, "Reality is just a suggestion." The council, though still visibly shaken, had sent flowers. That was considered a major concession. The department hosted its first conference just 3 months in. The theme was Impossibility as a Design Philosophy. Attendees included sentient math equations, rogue AI poets, and an intergalactic interpretive dance troupe. It culminated in a karaoke night where the reigning champion sang Bohemian Rhapsody entirely in gravitational waves. As the semester came to a close, Kalai, Jordan, and Zix met on the rooftop beneath an artificial aurora powered by caffeine emissions and optimism. They watched as students streamed out of the building below, some juggling lab gear, others discussing theories about building wormholes through stubbornness and spite. Jordan took a long sip of cocoa, satisfied. "We've done it." Kalai nodded. "We created a department for things that shouldn't exist." Zix smiled, eyes glowing with new shades of chromatic enlightenment, and somehow it works. Above them, stars winked like old conspirators. A council cruiser passed quietly overhead, blinking a single message across its hull in rotating glyphs. "We were wrong, carry on." Jordan laughed. "Told you they'd come around." Kalai raised her mug. "To the impossible." Zix tapped his against theirs. "To the students." And Jordan, as always, added with a grin, "To whatever comes next." It started with a cat. Not just any cat, of course. A slightly blurry video of a feline in a tiny astronaut suit pawing at a holographic keyboard labeled NASA, not actually sure astronaut. The caption simply read, "Launch sequence initiated." Also, meow. No one knew who uploaded it. Some said it came from Earth's deep archives. Others blamed Kalai. Jordan claimed plausible deniability. Professor Zix refused to comment, though he was seen giggling into his coffee later that day. By the time the council noticed, it had already reached over 200 star systems. That was when the meme firewall failed. For centuries, galactic civilizations had relied on robust data filters to prevent cross-species cultural contamination. Ancient protocols were designed to handle the occasional rogue sitcom or anomalous love ballad. They were not prepared for Earth's meme culture, compressed, chaotic, absurd, and dangerously contagious. The cat in the astronaut suit was just the beginning. Next came the "This is fine" image, quickly translated into over 300 alien dialects. A species made entirely of fire absorbed it as a sacred mantra. Their temple leaders now began every sermon with "This is fine" before entering meditation in volcanic chambers. Then it was Shrek, but dubbed in harmonic clicks, followed by a 10-hour loop of a dog saying "cheems" through a voice-to-vibration synthesizer. A civilization on the outskirts of Andromeda declared the video a perfect expression of quantum philosophy. Galactic internet traffic surged. Education grids crashed. An entire planet restructured its legal system after discovering the "Is this a pigeon" meme. Trials were now decided based on whether someone could accurately interpret ambiguous memes in a court of law. In the Department of Impossible Studies, Kalai was hosting a seminar titled Meme Theory, the Weaponization of Whimsy. The class was standing room only. Jordan wore a cape made of printed reaction GIFs and paced dramatically in front of a floating projector screen. "It's not just the content," Jordan explained, sipping from a cup labeled "Caffeinate the Chaos." "It's how fast it mutates. Earth memes are like viruses with punchlines." Professor Zix, whose latest paper was titled Memetic Shockwaves and the Decline of Rational Curriculum, sighed deeply as he handed out protective visors. Please refrain from opening unverified TikToks during class hours. We are still recovering from last week's interpretive meme dance incident. Despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it, the department's popularity soared. New funding poured in from planets who once scoffed at human absurdity and were now building meme archives. Alien scholars held heated debates over whether Doge represented a post-ironic critique of linguistic degradation or simply a universal vibe. In the Hall of Galactic Communication Standards, an emergency meeting was held. Diplomatic representatives were shown a video titled Skateboarding Skeletons Screaming into the Void, followed by a 30-minute lecture from a xenosociologist who concluded that humans have, somehow, created a form of cultural radiation. "This is memetic terrorism," muttered one delegate. "No," another whispered reverently. "This is art." Back on campus, a new lab was opened, the Meme Reactor. It ran on nonsense, irony, and occasionally pop songs from the 1990s. Kalai oversaw its safety protocols, which mostly consisted of "Don't feed the memes after midnight." Jordan launched a new course, Advanced Chaos, creating cultural shockwaves using only stock photos and regret. Students formed teams to build meme-based communication protocols. One group accidentally triggered a diplomatic alliance by sending a perfectly timed Kermit sipping tea GIF to a warlike reptilian empire. Peace talks began immediately. The council sent another delegation. This time, they didn't even try to shut the program down. They just asked, very quietly, if it was possible to enroll. At the semester's final symposium, Kalai took the stage and played a compilation of Earth's most absurd viral clips. The crowd, dozens of species with no shared evolutionary history, laughed in perfect synchronization. Jordan leaned over to Professor Zix. "Still think memes are a threat to intergalactic order?" Zix sipped his espresso, eyes twinkling. "Oh, absolutely. But perhaps that's exactly what the galaxy needs." High above the university, a rogue satellite launched from Earth drifted past. Its outer shell shimmered with a giant sticker that read, "Welcome to the Department of Impossible Studies, home of the meme that broke the multiverse." It wasn't supposed to go that far. Kalai had uploaded the meme as a joke, one final flourish at the end of their semester's lecture titled Chaos as Curriculum, When Pedagogy Breaks the Universe. Jordan had made it in a fit of sleep-deprived brilliance. Professor Zix had approved it, technically, by nodding absently while reading a student thesis titled Interdimensional Diplomacy and the Importance of Dance Battles. The meme was simple, a looped animation of a human baby slapping a computer keyboard, launching a spaceship, and captioned, "When you don't know how to do it, but the universe didn't say you couldn't." It was beautiful, it was reckless. It was the meme that broke the galaxy. It spread faster than any known broadcast. It bypassed every firewall, ignored protocol, and somehow became embedded in the emergency response systems of 7 major civilizations. Starships played it during takeoff. Hospitals displayed it in their waiting rooms. A war council paused mid-threat to forward it to their extended family. Alien diplomats began quoting it in negotiations. "As the humans say," one ambassador declared during a heated trade summit, "yeet or be yeeted." The deal was signed moments later. An intergalactic court ruled it as a cultural artifact of overwhelming narrative power. Even the Galactic Council, despite centuries of proud resistance to all things humorous, added a clause to their charter labeled Human Clause 42, for meme-related emergencies only. Back at the Department of Impossible Studies, chaos turned into tradition. Jordan declared every Thursday to be Cosmic Meme Day. The meme reactor had been upgraded and now generated spontaneous, inspirational slogans in alien languages. One morning it spat out, "Let the void fear your enthusiasm." It became the department's official motto. Kalai, now head of Applied Galactic Chaos Theory, ran simulations showing the correlation between meme exposure and peaceful contact between species. Her findings were conclusive. Humor is faster than light. Possibly more dangerous, definitely more fun. Professor Zix authored a groundbreaking textbook, The Meme as Method, an epistemological study of human cognitive grenades. It sold out across 5 galaxies. The council sent another delegation. This time, they came bearing cupcakes. Inside the great galactic amphitheater, Earth was awarded an unprecedented honor, Cultural Catalyst of the Cycle. Jordan accepted while wearing a cloak made of printer paper, duct tape, and hand-drawn memes. Kalai gave a speech entirely in Vine references. Zix bowed, with the gravitas of a man who had learned to stop worrying and love the chaos. The galaxy didn't change overnight, but it did start laughing. Species that once feared each other now traded joke formats. Peace treaties included clauses about meme exchanges. A ceasefire was declared when one side responded to a threat with "No you," and at the outer edge of the Orion Arm, a broadcast signal containing nothing but Earth's greatest hits, cat videos, espresso hacks, cooking fails, and yes, that meme, was sent toward the next galaxy. At the department, students gathered in the courtyard. The night sky pulsed with the light of distant civilizations discovering the meme for the first time. One by one, laughter echoed from orbit. Kalai leaned against a railing, holding a brownie in one hand and a datapad in the other. Jordan joined her, sipping something neon and probably illegal in 6 systems. "Think they'll ever understand us?" Kalai asked. Jordan grinned. "Oh, they already do. They just haven't figured out how to admit it." Zix walked up with a steaming mug. "The council wants us to host a new event." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Another summit?" "No," Zix said, eyes sparkling. "A meme conference." There was a long silence. Then Kalai whispered, "We could call it MemeCon." Jordan gasped. "And the dress code is just vibes." The stars above twinkled in quiet approval. Back in the council chamber, the original meme still looped silently on a corner screen. No one dared turn it off. It was now classified as a historical constant, like gravity or political denial. And somewhere far beyond the reach of light, a probe encountered a strange signal. It contained only laughter.